Hi, everybody. Welcome to an on-location edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford. He's Wes Hodkowitz. We're coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana, or just north of it, I guess. We've been here since Wednesday. The Packers had a joint practice against the Colts on Thursday. Preseason game is coming up on Saturday. How are you enjoying Indy so far?
Wonderful, Mike. I mean, the one thing that's really neat about Indianapolis is out of all these NFL cities, I feel like I know it the best. We've spent so much time here between the NFL scouting combine all these years. Coincidentally, this is one of two NFL stadiums I've yet to cover an actual game in.
Oh, wow.
I've been there for when the combine used to have the media center inside Lucas Oil. In February, I was here for the Royal Rumble, WWE, professional wrestling, sports entertainment. But I've never actually covered a football game here. So this particular trip for me, a little bit more sentimental. And fortunately, I will also give credit to the Indianapolis Colts. Their practice facility, from a media standpoint, from a viewing standpoint, probably the best joint practice I was able to watch as well.
Yeah, it was a really good setup. Other than the bugs and stuff, I'm not crazy about that on a hot summer day. Yeah, we did not bring the bug spray with us. But that aside, actually, we need to provide some updates here because literally not more than 10 minutes after we turned the cameras off on Tuesday, we went into a press conference with General Manager Brian Gutekunst Tuesday morning and found out that Packers quarterback Jordan Love is out this week. They're hoping to get him back next week. He has had a procedure done on his left hand because of a torn ligament in his left thumb from his last play of the preseason game against the Jets, where he was scrambling and then he got tackled for a sack. So a very different week than we anticipated with Jordan Love not being here. But the good news is that everything sounds like it's on track, that Love is not going to miss any regular season time. It's just a question of how much can he do when he gets back into practice next week, and then how quickly can things ramp up to then get ready for week one against the Lions.
You know, and I'm going to bust off the old, I haven't used it in years, but the old, like the Mike Spofford let's be real moment of the week. And that is the fact that Jordan Love in Monday's practice was handing the ball off with his throwing hand, which is uncustomary. You want to be able to do that with the left hand. If you're in the middle of the season, you do what you got to do. But as Love was saying to you and the other reporters, this is the time of the year you want to go into the regular season as healthy as possible. And from my perspective, at this very moment when I'm writing Insider Inbox and answering some of these questions, my thought on everything is he had a full offseason in Green Bay. He did the full installs in the first 2 weeks of practice, which in training camp practice, which is really the second run through of the installs. So the grasp of the offense and what the Packers want to achieve is there. And then lastly, he needs to get healthy. These receivers need to get healthy. Yes, you want to get him some reps with Matthew Golden and Savion Williams, but the fact of the matter is Jaden Reed's banged up right now. Dontavian Wicks has been down for a little bit with the calf injury. And then you also have Rome Dobbs going down with this back issue in practice earlier this week. So in addition to the fact that Christian Watson isn't back yet. So get him healthy, get these receivers healthy, and go from there. He seems to be in really good spirits, and it was cool seeing him at practice as well. He was still doing his typical handshakes with all the running backs. He was going through the motions like everybody else, but ultimately this is about the Detroit Lions. It's about week one, and this is the move that best gets the most 100% version of Jordan Love there.
And that's really what the whole decision was about, because he said if this had happened in the regular season, he'd probably try to play through it, hope it would heal on its own and just get better as things go along. But because of when it happened and the time frame prior to week one, there's enough time to heal from the surgery, to get things as close to back to normal as possible. So that's why the decision was made. Jordan Love had to battle through a bunch of injuries last year. There was the knee from the play in Brazil, and then eventually a groin injury and some other things. He doesn't want to start the season feeling less than 100%. He wants to be all the way there when that ball is kicked off against Detroit.
And it's a long season, Mike. 17 regular season games is a long way to go, and the Packers, especially this year, are going to play 4 before that bye week. So anything you can do to get this team as close to 100% possible is going to be obviously preferable. The tough situation for the Packers from my vantage point is that first week of training camp practice, they were very healthy. Now, mind you, the pads hadn't gone on yet, but it looked like everything was trending in the right direction. A couple soft tissue injuries pop up, a couple injuries here to these receivers, and it kind of changes the tone a little bit. But all that being said, I feel like they are able to still get in the work they want to be able to, administer, be able to install. And the byproduct and the nice thing is, too, a guy like Malik Willis, who was not here for training camp last year, does get these opportunities to run with the number one offense, the number one offensive line. So, Jordan Love trying to get him to the Lions game and then obviously go from there.
Yeah, well, we did watch the joint practice here in central Indiana. We were in Westfield as I'm trying to learn central Indiana geography while we're around, because we're not in downtown Indy until
like we usually are
until the game, which is where we usually are for the combine. You were watching the Packers defense versus the Colts offense. I was watching Packers offense versus Colts defense. So I will start with this, because you were just talking about Malik Willis, the number one offensive line, but then sort of the backup group of receivers. And, quite frankly, it was a rough day in this joint practice for the Packers offense, particularly in the passing game, really, I should specify. It's not that there were, a bunch of protection breakdowns or this or that. You could just tell that they weren't able to get into any kind of a rhythm offensively. They just, it's like, you hit a play here and there, but nothing that was sustained, nothing that was consistent. It was a frustrating day in that regard. And credit to the Colts. Their coverage was tight. They did get some pressure on Willis at times, but it was a tough day. I did think that running the ball, I thought the Packers did some pretty good things. Now, you never know for sure when the tackling isn't live. You don't know exactly, is Josh Jacobs going to be tackled at that moment, or is he going to be able to slip by that guy, break the tackle there, that kind of stuff. But I thought on balance, the Packers' run game looked like it showed up to play.
And obviously you watched the offense. I didn't get to see any of it because where I was down on the other opposite end of the field and the practice facility. But I'll say this before I get into the defense. Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Goodson could find no running lanes for the most part when they were going up against the Packers' first-team defense. They were getting stuff within the first 5 yards. So if you see Josh, you're right. Does he go down? Does he not go down? There was an interesting anecdote that I know you were able to get as well about trying to gauge whether or not you get brought to the ground. But the fact that Jacobs was breaking through, I think, still does speak some volumes to things. And also the way to look at this thing, too, from, again, my perspective is, these are ultimately a lot of the guys that are going to be playing in this preseason game. It was a little bit different than the joint practices from the offensive sense that we've seen in the past, because a lot of times it was the first-team starters, it was the top receivers, it was Jordan Love getting in that work before ultimately sitting on the sidelines on Saturday. So as difficult and as frustrating as some of those moments may have been for the passing game, I'm curious to see what it looks like on Saturday when you are now going up against a lot of the backups for the Indianapolis Colts, and seeing if those guys can maybe use some of those experiences from Thursday and put it towards a better effort on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were watching the defensive side of things, and the Packers defense had a pretty strong day by all accounts. You were there for all of it. What stood out most to you?
It was just an impressive performance all around. I mean, and the tone was set from one-on-ones on. I mean, the defensive front in particular, they were just having their way with that Indianapolis Colts offensive line. And off the edge, I thought Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness started the pressure party. Both of those guys, and especially Van Ness, I mean, he had a terrific rush right off the beginning for a sack of Anthony Richardson, and that just kind of seemed like it started every single play. If he wasn't sacked, he was under pressure. They had a hard time in the 11-on-11 periods getting any type of downfield passing game going. They had some success with it in the 2-minute, which was sort of the little bit of the caveat to it, and that was the part that the Packers defense afterwards was talking about. They wish they would have finished stronger, but by and large, after what happened against the Jets, and I was talking with Kenny Clark about this after the practice, they felt like that was a wake-up call for them. And as Kenny said to us, I mean, he has not really spoken in the post-game locker room very often during his 10 years. Packers have had a lot of leaders, a lot of more vocal people that they've handled those responsibilities. But in that instance, he said he had some stuff on his heart that he needed to get off his chest, and the big message there was, he's been around some really talented Packer teams. He believes this Packers team can be right up there with them, but we have to be able to carry through everything we do during the practice week into the game settings, and they didn't do that against the Jets. And I felt like every emphasis that Green Bay preached when we were talking to the coaches, when we were talking to players this week, they came through with that in this practice against the Colts.
Yeah, well, that opening drive for the Packers' number one defense last week against the Jets didn't sit well. Justin Fields took the Jets down. They got a touchdown, and then that was kind of the end of the action for the starters. So they had that, marinating, for a few days, and I thought they came out and really took it to the Colts. And another sign of that, the Colts are trying to figure out on their side of things whether Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones is going to be their starting quarterback for the upcoming season. After practice, of course, that was the big question for Shane Steichen, the head coach. Like, hey, where are things at with and he really didn't make any commitment on one quarterback or another, which tells you neither one of those quarterbacks stood out enough for the Colts to be able to make a decision here.
100%. And I'm glad you brought up that point about the mobility of Justin Fields, because one thing I actually didn't get into my story that I probably should have was the emphasis that the defensive players had in practice, and also going into this joint practice this week, that they were going up against another mobile guy.
Yeah.
And honestly, Daniel Jones kind of fits that category too. He's a guy that will take off. They ran plenty of read option concepts, and the Packers defensive front, I mean, obviously you're not going to touch the quarterback, but they had their run fits where they needed to be. They did not get burnt on anything in that regard, so that was a positive sign. And the other aspect too that I liked, and in addition to the 3 interceptions that they had, was Javon Bullard being able to punch out the ball from Mitchell, the receiver from the Colts. We heard from Jeff Hafley this week talk about that preseason game against the Jets. They have this huge emphasis on forced fumbles, and it didn't carry through in that preseason game against the Jets. The Packers were back punching at the ball in this practice. Evan Williams ended up picking that ball up, running it back for a touchdown. Obviously, would it have been a touchdown or not, that's up for you to decide. But the fact is the point of emphasis was there. The Packers were looking for the ball. They were gunning for the ball, and several times they came up with the ball.
Yeah, all right. Well, a few more thoughts here before we go, but we do need to pay some bills, even though we're away from home. So for now, a word from our sponsors. SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. At Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. Pit Boss Grills, the official grill of Packers tailgating at Lambeau or at your house. Take your game day to the next level with a Pit Boss wood pellet grill. Pit Boss Grills available at Menards. Welcome back to our on-location edition of Packers Unscripted. And Wes, I want to get to your thoughts on what you're looking for in this preseason game coming up at Lucas Oil Stadium on Saturday. But one last thought on the joint practice, because we have to talk about Brandon McManus.
Yeah, how fun is that?
He had a really good session. They put the Colts field goal rush team out on the field, and so the Packers were practicing their kicks, and the same thing was happening with the reverse on the other field. McManus, as has been typical of this training camp, had a really good session, booming some long kicks, upper 40s in distance, 55-yarder right through. He hit a 56-yarder, I believe it was, and it was good by plenty. He had a little bit of a breeze at his back, but he absolutely nailed it. So then when the Colts left the field and the other Packer guys are leaving the field, he kept Matt Orzik and Daniel Whelan, his snapper and a holder out there. They just set up for one more quick kick, and he lined up for a 70-yarder.
Yep.
Of course, Jacksonville's Cam Little in the Jaguars preseason opener hit a 70-yard field goal.
He did.
So McManus is like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. And so, of course, he can kick it a little bit lower because there's no rush coming from the other side. But he drilled it, and it hit the crossbar, almost right smack dab in the middle, too. Hit the crossbar, bounced up, and went over. The crowd that was watching it definitely, let out a roar of approval. It was a pretty neat thing. But just another sign of how locked in Brandon McManus has been since training camp began.
And two things here about the special teams. The first one on McManus, what a hypocrite I look like, because I just got done an insider inbox this week saying, why would kickers be trying 70-yard field goals? You don't need to make the team. You don't need to get yourself hurt. And after Cam Little does it, there's Brandon doing it as well. But
didn't want to be upstaged in this kicking preseason game.
Right. And Rich Bisaccia had talked about the work that he put in this offseason. And Brandon said it himself. He feels like he came back in the best shape of his career. I know that's kind of a cliche, but he really feels like, they talked about him being a 22-year-old kicker with his experience. And the other thing I think we sometimes forget about, too, when Brandon McManus broke into the league a decade ago, he was known for his leg. Like, that was one of the big things when he was trying to get in with Denver. Everyone knew his leg strength, and it was just about honing the rest in. And obviously at 34 years young, showing he can still do it.
Well, yeah, and he wasn't just making long field goals in Denver because of the altitude and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the leg has always been there for Brandon McManus. So
I want to mention this too about special teams, because one of the fun one, I think there's not a lot to write about it because we just typically don't. Media coverage doesn't emphasize the third phase, especially in practices. But joint practices might be the most beneficial day of all because of what you said. Whether it was the field goal rush team, whether it was the kickoff coverage team, punt returns, you are going up against another unit. And for the most part, it's kind of a live rep. And what impressed me is that, well, one, you take some notes, right? You and I have been covering this team a long time. You can kind of start to see the trends of the roster. A rookie seventh round pick, Micah Robinson, was on the kickoff cover team. That's a big thing for a young guy, the number one kickoff cover team. That tells you what Rich Bisaccia and these coaches are thinking of what this young man's doing. And two, I've been saying it a lot. I will eventually write it. It'll probably be another week or so. But if you ever want another we focus so much about the receiver cornerback thing with Bo Melton. If you ever want a really good feel for what this guy does and why he ultimately has been as successful as he's been, watch him on punt coverage.
Yeah.
Because I made this comment this past week, and I said, he is, in my opinion, one man's opinion, he's the best flyer the Packers have had since Jeff Janis. Now, some people are like, well, what about Jared Bush? Thanks for checking your notes. Jared Bush's last year with the Packers was in 2014. Jeff Janis was drafted in 2014. Appreciate you keeping up. But the fact of the matter is that Bo has the speed.
Oh, yeah.
And he has just that relentless tenacity. We saw it in one of actually it was the practice on Tuesday. It wasn't even the joint practice, where the Packers set up a double team against him. He split it, and he got down the field to force a fair catch. So much is on Daniel Whelan. It is his job to get that ball down there and give his gunners and give everybody as much time as possible to get down the field. But Bo Melton with 4.3 whatever speed makes it a lot easier too. And as we're making this case for him and the cornerback transition, don't forget he's been a very pivotal player on the Packers special teams as well.
Yeah, no question about it. Well, the second preseason game is on deck here at Lucas Oil. It'll be Saturday afternoon, a noon Central Time kickoff, which is kind of nice.
It's awesome
from a work standpoint. Yeah.
UFC pay-per-view at night. I get home for the entire thing.
There you go. Well, we have to stick to that schedule.
Absolutely.
For sure. So,
especially in training camp.
Well, UFC aside, what are you looking for on Saturday? What will your eyes be on in terms of watching what's going on with the Packers?
Well, first and foremost, it will be a great opportunity for Malik Willis and Sean Clifford and obviously Taylor Eldridge being able to get some more reps in this game. You're not trying to get snaps to 4 quarterbacks. You're only trying to get them to 3. They've obviously had more practice reps this week. You hope that can help them all out. But I actually am really interested to see the running game for Green Bay because Israel Abanikanda also returned at this practice. He missed one with a hamstring tweak, but ended up being fine. He was formerly with the San Francisco 49ers. They brought another running back into the mix this week. The one position where they've kind of gotten healthier, though, is that backfield. Emmanuel Wilson and Marshawn Lloyd both returned. Matt LaFleur, before practice, was asked about Lloyd and just what his reps are going to look like. He wanted to make sure he got through that particular joint practice before figuring that all out. But you had to edit me this week, Mike, when we were writing the Insider Inbox column. This might be the most excited I've been to watch a player in a preseason game because as Lloyd even talked about at his locker this week, it's basically, well, it has been almost a year since he played an NFL game. Coincidentally, it was the Colts in that regular season opener. But as he said, even just to have like a consistent amount of reps, it really got to go back to his time at USC. So he has the explosiveness. He has the power. He has the speed. There's a reason why this guy was a third-round pick, and Daniel Jeremiah and guys were talking about him being the best running back in that draft class. And now we finally get, hopefully, a chance to see it. He's had the right mentality, and now hopefully he can actually get out there and do it on the field.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week as far as the Packers backfield because, as you said, Emmanuel Wilson, Marshawn Lloyd have come back from injuries. They're looking to get some snaps in this game. Abanikanda missed a practice, but he's back as well. And we had talked on our last show about Amar Johnson from the preseason opener against the Jets and what he did. I will say this as far as watching the Packers running game yesterday, and there were a lot of good things that were going on. If I were to pick one of those backup running backs, that really stood out to me in terms of the really running hard, like we talked about with Johnson in the Jets game, it was Chris Brooks. Chris Brooks brought it to the Colts yesterday. He was not shying away from contact at all. Not to say that any of the other guys were, but just watching the reps that Chris Brooks got, it was like, okay, he had some kind of a purpose out there that was maybe a little bit different. So this whole backup running back battle and what the pecking order is going to be when the Packers get to week 1, games like this and next week against the Seahawks are going to go a long way in determining that.
That's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought up Chris Brooks, because sometimes you can be sort of the forgotten man of this party just because of how darn consistent he is.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, Mike, I don't like playing the comparison game. I obviously never like doing that in Insider Inbox, but the more I watch him, the more he does kind of remind me of that Jamal Williams type back. A guy that had a natural foundation for pass protection, for pass catching. You're seeing some of the stuff they do with the two-back stuff. He comes in out of nowhere after getting injury settled in Miami, signs the Packers practice squad, and by the end of the season, he's the featured guy in that.
Yeah.
There's times now where the Packers will utilize him. We saw it in some of these practices. The Packers have been utilizing him and then using Emmanuel Wilson as the second back. It's not even that it has to be the Josh Jacobs show all the time. Chris Brooks, in addition to also providing a presence on special teams, definitely a guy to keep an eye on as well.
Well, on the defensive side of the ball against the Colts in this preseason game, I think what you'd really like to see is the guys who played well on defense with the reserve units last week, can they do it again? Can they stack the performances? And I'm talking about guys like Colby Wooden up front, Tyron Hopper at the linebacker level, and then in sort of a different vein, Isaiah Simmons at linebacker, who's been having a really strong camp. The Jets game didn't really go the way he wanted it to, but then he had a big interception in the 2-minute against the Colts, had a really solid joint practice here in Indy. So does that carry over for him now into the second preseason game as a guy like that, a veteran guy who's trying to find a role on this defense and whatnot as he's fighting for a roster spot?
I loved his run fits too, man. I mean, yeah, the interception, everybody kind of saw that. But earlier in practice, the 11-on-11s, when I was talking about Jonathan Taylor not really having a lot of room, Isaiah Simmons did a phenomenal job of closing in. He kind of has that explosiveness that Edgerrin Cooper has, where he can get to the spot quickly. And I felt like he did that. The other guy, too, is obviously Tyron Hopper. And I keep talking about him over and over again. And the main reason for that is it's just this depth of the inside linebacker room is why I think we haven't seen a lot of him. It's not that he's not ready for it. I mean, he's getting massive reps as the number 2 Mike linebacker. I made the comment, I don't know how you felt about it, but in Insider Inbox, there would have been a time 10 years ago where they would have drafted Tyron Hopper and he would have been in the starting lineup on day 1 next to A.J. Hawk. I mean, like, they just were that hard up for inside backers for a long period of time. They were moving outside guys inside. Now they have this embarrassment of riches at that position. And fortunately for them, unlike the receiver spot right now, they've been able to keep that unit healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we will be off to Lucas Oil Stadium very soon, but for now we will call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to continue to follow all of our coverage of training camp and of Saturday's preseason game from Indy. We'll have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.